Hey guys, welcome back. So continuing our playlist on everything The Batman Who Laughs, we reached the point now to where his miniseries, which used to say 6-part miniseries, is now saying 7-part miniseries. And trust me, I'm not one to complain because I'm just waiting for that number and the word mini to go away and it just say series. And mainly because The Batman Who Laughs has talked about more of his experiences than we have seen, and I still want to see them. So fingers crossed we'll get lucky and see that later. And for now, we'll just ride this wave of chaos and see where it takes us. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so in our last talk, and actually in the last 2 videos, The Batman Who Laughs and the Grim Knight had pretty much driven both Batman and Commissioner Gordon into a corner of hopelessness. And in the case of the Grim Knight, much like I talked about in the last video, on his end there's a clear deviation from the plans of the Batman Who Laughs, because the Batman Who Laughs, who wants to keep Gordon alive, he has a plan and a purpose for Gordon being here. But as soon as he left, the Grim Knight was just like, bump that, I'm finna kill him, and the Batman Who Laughs can just improvise. And on the other hand, in the case of Batman, who was cornered by the Batman Who Laughs, who knew that with Batman forging his own visor and at this point being infected with the Joker toxin, that allowing him to catch up with the Batman Who Laughs was just the perfect setup. And after switching back into his disguise, the Batman Who Laughs tells the other guards to open fire and he just teleports up out of there. And what's crazy is that as fans we know, Batman's cape and cowl, his entire suit, they're fire and bullet resistant, to where in just about any case he can take enough just to get away. And when one of the officers is like, the cape is Kevlar, shoot him in the mouth, it's just like back in the day with Blank Man, where you have this hero who created this bulletproof fabric, but he had nothing covering his head. And one day a back alley villain was just like, yo, shoot him in the head. And all the other bad guys were like, yeah, shoot him in the head. And I mean, later on we saw the same thing with Shazam, but with Batman, who's usually on a clear mind, it's rare that you catch him under this much fire, because in most instances he's smart enough to keep himself out of this type of situation. But even while this is happening, he hears them call for the armor-piercing rounds, and for those with the armor-piercing rounds to step to the front. And this puts him in an even tougher spot to where he has to pick up the already dead body of the Bruce Wayne that the Batman Who Laughs had killed and brought here from the dark multiverse, and use him as a human shield. But it does help that this deceased version of Bruce Wayne, who was the Warden in his universe, he had always wore a bulletproof vest, which now at this time is giving this Batman another layer of protection. But after crawling into the shadows to where he can use the cowl to cover his mouth, it's here that he figures out his way how to get out of this corner. But to me, I couldn't help but think, like, somebody like, we can't see his mouth, so shoot him in the eye. Boom! Game over. Now that just would have been the worst, but instead what he does to get out of here is he plays into who they already think he is, and he starts calling these different officers by name and telling them that he will come after them, and it may not be tomorrow, it may not be weeks from now, might not even be a year. And it's a wild trichotomy with Batman figuring this out with the Joker toxin in his system, because not only is Bruce Wayne fighting against this toxin to find a way out of here, but with the toxin suggesting to him its own version of what people are saying, it's almost like it's helping Batman to know who to call out and who to threaten, almost as if he's going beyond what they're saying and reading their minds. And last but not least, for the exclamation point to get out of this corner, like, it's gonna take a lot for somebody to top Batman in the conversation when he tells somebody that he had to cut off his own head and hold it up while infected with the Joker toxin just to escape with his life. Like, man, that takes some mental toughness or mental sickness. I really can't tell at this point, because Batman is dancing on that line to where it's like, are you okay? No, really, are you okay? Like, had that been me, I'd have just been there in the dark like, okay man, like, just give me a minute, y'all guys, just give me a minute. Okay, nah, I can't do this. Well, I gotta do this. Like, I'd have been stuck for a minute even after coming up with that plan. But jumping back over to the Grim Knight, who has used the Robins to hunt down Jim Gordon, to where it's here that we find out that the Batman Who Laughs had made these Robins from other versions of James Gordon Jr. And I feel like that's one of the things that Scott Snyder kind of took that was hanging around from Dark Knight's Metal and just put it into the Batman Who Laughs series in order to tie up some loose ends, and also make the addition that the Batman Who Laughs had made these Robins for the Grim Knight. And that could have been the case from day one, but there are a few things from Dark Knight's Metal that to this day were still kind of left like loose ends, and the Nightmare Robins were just one of them. But in my opinion, Nightwing being the weapon, that was like the biggest one that just didn't get fully fleshed out. And it's bittersweet because with doing so, you're also leaving room either for Scott Snyder or another writer to bring that back up, whether it be Dan Jurgens, who's doing the current run on Nightwing. But either way, either Jurgens or Snyder can pull from that and literally take it in any direction that they like. And for me, that is the payoff I'm really waiting for. for. But in the case of James Gordon, who's being hunted by the Grim Knight and his pack of piranha robins, he just jumps into the waterways in order to escape, but the current is so strong he's like a goldfish getting flushed down a toilet. But it's at this point, like we had talked about, James Gordon Jr. comes to his dad's rescue by picking off the other robins pretty much and pulling his dad out of the water. And this is a twofold payoff, much like we talked about in the last video with the Grim Knight getting his revenge on Gordon, because prior to this point Jim Gordon had been checking the other waterways and this was the last one. And because of that, it wasn't but a matter of time before he ran into his father, to where he saved his father very much the same way that Batman saved himself, with both involving them running into an alternate version, or for James, versions of themselves. But from here, going over to the Batman Who Laughs, the narrative takes a brilliant and surprising turn when we see the Batman Who Laughs approach the Court of Owls. And he does so in order to ask for their help so they more or less fall into line with his plans, because one of the most important things that he says is that they want the same thing. But the Court of Owls, they don't even hear him out, they just call for the Talons to take him down, kind of like the Sandman at the Apollo. But the Batman Who Laughs is already taking care of that because they are literally unarmed. And with the Talons pretty much being taken out of the way, that just leaves the council, and when they make their attempt to escape, the Batman Who Laughs has already set explosions throughout the mazes that lead their way out. And just like that, the Court of Owls are taken out of the picture, because although he was soliciting their help, he had also set a contingency that if they refused, he would get rid of them so they wouldn't get in his way. And I love that Scott Snyder went here within this narrative, because I believe had this miniseries concluded and we had not seen the Court of Owls at no point in time, especially with a plan that deals into the history of Gotham with the Last Laugh Protocol, that a number of Batman fans and a number of Scott Snyder fans, they all would have been like how come at no point in time the Court of Owls didn't get involved? And to be honest, only because it's such a short series, only because it's a 7-part miniseries. But had this been a narrative that would have been allowed to run longer, personally I imagine that the Court of Owls would have got involved a lot sooner, because in most cases Scott Snyder has shown us that the Court of Owls, they're usually ahead of Earth Zero Batman, but in this case they're none the wiser to the plans of the Batman Who Laughs. But after this happens, in a blip we get the arrival of an alternate Bruce Wayne, to whom in his universe he ended up becoming the leader of the Court of Owls. And when he appears, although he's initially in confusion, he faces off with the Batman Who Laughs, and the Batman Who Laughs fights him off just enough in order to leave Bruce there and get away. But from here, going back to Batman, who gets a call from James Gordon Jr., who lets him know that him and his dad are safe, and so Batman sends him a transport for them to meet up at the Batcave, because it's clear at this point that the Batman Who Laughs has been booby trapping out the bando. But at this point, with everybody back at the Batcave, both Jim and James Gordon are there, and initially at this point with everyone together, they're noticing their advantages, because it's like they were lucky and they got Jim out of there. And luckily enough, they went after the Batman Who Laughs before him and the Grim Knight were able to hack the Last Laugh Protocol. And with Batman planning to use it as a quarantine to close off Gotham's waterways from distributing this toxin out, just before Batman did the 2-person authentication, it began to click we're too lucky. Too much of this worked out. And at this time, Batman and James Gordon Jr. began to realize that this is possibly what the Batman Who Laughs had wanted all along. And this is why James Gordon Jr. didn't find any tampering in the waterways, because the Batman Who Laughs wanted them to get away and wanted them to get to this point. And it's at that moment that the phone rings, or more or less a phone. He's upgraded from the flashing red phone. But at this moment, it's the Batman Who Laughs who calls, and he tells Batman that he wants to show him something. And initially Batman's like, if it's another Bruce Wayne, you can save it. And the Batman Who Laughs like, nah bro, not this time. But instead, rather, he tells Batman that this is what he's wanted to show him this whole time, which is basically that the Batman Who Laughs wants to use the Last Laugh Protocol for what it was intended to be used for back in 1699, nearly 100 years before the birth of the United States, and before certain laws and regulations would have prohibited this type of infrastructure. But the Batman Who Laughs goes on to tell him, while showing him these older maps which he got from the Court of Owls, that the Last Laugh Protocol, it was actually built to make Gotham sit at a seat of power. And so everyone else, Jim Gordon, Alfred over on the comms, even James Gordon Jr., they don't trust this. And Jim Gordon goes over to stop Batman, which he wasn't about to do with his bare hands. I don't know what he's thinking. But Batman quickly gets him out the way, and James Gordon Jr., who didn't say anything, he just pulled the hammer back. But James Gordon didn't even get off a shot, because Batman had also taken precaution to keep James from stopping him, and mainly because there are traps already set throughout the Batcave, so in this point it just came in handy. But with doing so, Batman had to disable them quickly because the clock's ticking, and the window for the 2-man authentication is closing. And at this point, with Alfred really being the only voice of reason, trying to pull Bruce back, telling him that Gotham is not what it was, but it can be better because of you and because of what you've done. And Bruce is like, yeah, I tried that, but it hasn't worked. And after saying that, he mutes Alfred in the last second. At the last second, he authenticates and activates the Last Laugh Protocol. which is exactly what the Batman Who Laughs wanted. But that'll do it for this one, guys. So now, this isn't the first time we've seen Batman not just switch sides, but like pose to give the antagonist what they wanted. And because of that, I'm just curious to see if the Batman Who Laughs actually realizes that the closer that this Batman gets to being like him, the more of a threat and the more dangerous he is. But let me know your guys' thoughts down below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.